Welcome back to Killer Fun, where we explore the intersection of crime and entertainment every other week. I'm Christy.
And I'm Jackie.
And we're so glad that you're back with us today. Today, we are talking about the documentary on Amazon Prime, Lorena, from 2019.
Which I am totally remiss to have not paid attention to this earlier.
For real, because it's so good. We're going to talk about episode 1, The Night of an Abused Wife Takes Drastic Action. Now, before we go any further.
Yes, let's do this now.
We won't be ugly or have any foul language, but we will be using anatomically correct verbiage. We'll be discussing sensitive subjects, including domestic abuse, sexual abuse, and references to graphic abuse. Please keep that in mind as you're listening. If you need help because you are in a domestic violence situation, if you are in the United States, you can call 1-800-799-SAFE, S-A-F-E. That's 1-800-799-7233, and that'll get you the National Domestic Violence Hotline. You can also text them, START, S-T-A-R-T, all capitals, to 88788, or you can live chat online with them at thehotline.org. Now, if you are outside of the United States, these will not work for you, but if you're having issues and you feel like sending a private message on Facebook or Twitter would be safer for you than doing a internet search, send me a message where you're located, and I will try and find you help.
Yes, absolutely. Take advantage of that if you are in that situation, because we are thinking of you.
That's right.
And we want to be of service to you and help you.
Well, nobody should ever feel like they're in a situation where their only option is to cut off their husband's penis.
That's absolutely correct.
This is the long and short of it. It should never happen.
Yes. And don't do that. If you're thinking really about it, I get it. Don't do that. Because talk to us first.
Yeah. Yeah, really don't. There are better ways. You don't want to end up like Lorena.
No,
because
you really don't.
Things have turned out okay for her, but it was really hard going there for her for a long, long time.
It was rough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so the cast is everybody's appearing as themselves.
Yes. This is a true thing.
Including John Wayne Bobbitt and his former spouse, Lorena. And then we get a host of other people, both expected, like media and attorneys, and kind of unexpected, like neighbors and jurors.
Jurors, yes, and witnesses.
And they're all giving information and opinions.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting because I think the national understanding, and I say the U.S. national understanding of this case, shallow.
Oh, absolutely. Particularly contemporaneously. In the 90s, when this was going on, I mean, we heard very little about the things we should have been hearing about.
Yep. And there were reasons for that.
Yeah.
Like gag orders and not allowing media at one trial and allowing it in another. And also just maybe a less critical eye on the judicial system at the time, at least as far as the national understanding, because you're getting it from the media, and there were less avenues for critical analysis for your average person.
Right. That's fair.
Which we have so many more.
Right.
And that's a blessing and a curse. Because you know, the understanding of what a critical analysis is also kind of used fast and loose. I digress.
Yeah. Okay. So let's recap. So we are informed or reminded, whatever your age is, of the media frenzy that surrounded the double trials of the Bobbitt couple. John Wayne Bobbitt was facing charges of marital sexual abuse for raping Lorena, and Lorena Bobbitt was charged with malicious wounding for severing her husband's penis with a kitchen knife. There's a whole lot of talk in this first episode about reattaching John's manhood, which Lorena willingly shared the location of when she was questioned by police. She had gone to the police station to report the sexual abuse, and they said, "We'll take your information, but first we need to know where John's stuff is. And she absolutely just told them where it was. There was no hiding it.
No,
none of it. We learn how the couple met, their brief courtship, a timeline of their tumultuous 4-year relationship, some accounts of the events of that night of June 1993 when the incident happened, and that John was acquitted by a jury of 9 women and 3 men of the charges of marital sexual abuse. Lorena's trial is the subsequent episodes. There's 4 episodes total in this documentary series.
It goes fast, y'all.
I mean, it goes so fast.
Yeah, just turn it on, go fast.
Have you watched it all?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
I could not stop watching that one. And sometimes I think to myself with a show we're watching, I'm like, ooh, that's good. I'm gonna go back and stay up late and kind of like watch it. And I'll get tired and not do it. And then I'll kind of be late to the game of finishing it. Yeah. Not this one.
No, this one, this got a solid B from both audiences and critics. Audience score on Rotten Tomatoes is 80%, 83% from the critics.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. I thought it was really good. So Monica Castillo of Remenzica wished they had paid a little more attention to Lorena's immigration status.
Oh, interesting.
They talk about it some, not a ton, but some. And she says there's one aspect of Lorena's case that I wish had been discussed more, because Lorena came to this country without her family. It left her isolated and without shelter or safety.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought about that too. So I'm in total agreement of that.
I absolutely agree. And then John Doyle of Globe and Mail found the Battle of the Sexes portion of this quite interesting. Perhaps the most telling sequence in the series is a set of interviews with 2 jurors on that trial, one woman and the other the man.
Yeah, that was so interesting too.
Yeah. Anna Murray of the New Zealand Herald found their coverage of domestic abuse good.
Okay.
So the story's emphasis is where it should be, the wider issue of domestic abuse. All right. Well, we're going to take a quick break and we're going to look at Is It True? Psychology break and real life after this.
So here's how it works. Christy wrecks her search history. Hey, NSA, we promise it's nothing more nefarious than a podcast. To find out what's true, some of the psychological motivations behind the characters' actions, and real-life applications that relate to our topic. I have no idea what Christy decided to look up. Could be the same thing that captured my curiosity or something I never thought of.
Is it true? So we see archival footage of the U.S. Surgeon General, Dr. C. Everett Koop, talking about the shame that there was animal abuse laws passed 100 years before the first domestic abuse shelter was created. And this is, unfortunately, absolutely true. So,
I had to rewind it.
Yeah.
I had to watch him say it again.
Yeah.
I was like,
no way. Yes way.
Yeah. That's awful.
The animal cruelty legislation was first passed in New York in 1828. And that law served for the basis of the formation of the American Society of Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, the ASPCA, founded by Henry Burr in 1866. And that put the foundation for animal cruelty for the entire nation. 1866.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's talk about a couple of things from 1966 and 1967 from the National Center on Domestic and Sexual Violence. The timeline of the battered women's movement. Now, let's just start. The timeline doesn't start until the 1950s.
I mean, oh my gosh.
Uh-huh. Okay. I'm going to just let that go. I'm not going to let it go, but I'm not going to talk about it more because it won't be productive. So in 1966, beating as cruel and inhumane treatment becomes grounds for divorce in New York.
So 1966. This is the first time that women can actually divorce their husband and legally because they're being beaten.
And oh, by the way, there have to be a sufficient number of beatings for it to be grounds for divorce.
What?
Yeah.
Not sufficient evidence.
No, a sufficient number.
I have an interesting conversation in my mind about that anyways, but sufficient number of beatings, like it has to be.
Like if it's not at least a dozen, then it doesn't count. I'm sorry, he only beat you to black and blue 11 times, not 12. I don't know what the number is. I'm making the number up. But,
oh my God. Okay.
And then it was 1967, actually 101 years post ASPCA, that Maine opened one of the first shelters for domestic abuse victims.
Oh my gosh. Isn't that just...
It tells you everything you need to know about how much this country values women.
Yep.
Lorena fell into the age group that is most likely to become a victim in domestic violence. So Lorena was 19 when she and John met and married, and 23 at the time of the incident. And women, according to a safeplaceforhelp.org, aged 20 to 24 are the greatest risk of becoming victims of domestic violence. Every day, 3 women are murdered at the hand of their intimate partners. Domestic violence is the leading cause of injury to women, more than accidents, muggings, and even rapes combined.
Wow.
The most dangerous thing to women is their partner.
Isn't that just... I mean, think about I'm talking about this animal thing in my head. I'm going, look at the number of places where you can go adopt, and that like there's all this, fostering and like all of this stuff and women.
And a lot of paperwork. Some places make you do a home visit before you can adopt an animal.
I mean, there's just such an intentional, and I agree with all of the mindfulness that's in that whole industry, and grateful for those who are doing such wonderful work. It's just that then when you kind of look at how women are being treated, and I don't think women are animals.
No.
I don't think that women need people to have to take care of them the same way. And I think maybe that's part of the conversation, is that others who may disagree or feel like it's not as big of a deal probably feel like, but you're human beings. Can't you just stand up for yourself? Can't you just do what I do? Like when I'm picturing a man saying that, like, well, why can't they just stand up? Why can't they just hit back? Why can't they just... And it's like, well, unfortunately, the dynamics aren't that way. And it just... So at some point, you have to reach in and kind of help. But no, women are not going to need, like, adoption agencies.
No.
But they do need the basic protection, equal protection under the law.
To be believed when they say that they're being abused by their spouse.
Right, and to receive help just the same way as if a stranger came in. But it's the being married or being in a relationship that almost makes it, you become property. If there was a single woman who was attacked by a home invader, absolutely, that woman would be protected. And believed, and the person would be sought, and it would be a whole thing. But when it's in a relationship, isn't that weird that all of a sudden they do become property? Like, and we're just fighting that on multiple fronts right now, right?
That's super fair. Yep, and boys who witness domestic violence are far more likely to become abusers. So, it's a perpetuating cycle, which really stinks.
Oh, gosh. What else you got? I'm fired up.
One more hard one.
Okay.
The idea of marital rape is pretty new.
Isn't that annoying? I'm using the word annoying because I don't have the right word to say.
Because I'm literally annoyed by it.
I'm annoyed on like such a severe level, like a cellular level. Annoyed. Why in the world did it take so long for this to be a thing?
So for as long as it took for beating to be considered abuse by a spouse, it took longer for the idea that a spouse could rape the other person in the relationship. This is from criminaldefenselawyer.com, that until the 1970s, the rape laws in every state of the union included an exception if the rapist and the victim were husband and wife.
So, hold on. It just, what can you do but laugh? It just hit me. It would have been considered rape. And they went to the extra measure of making sure that there was an exception.
Yes.
So this isn't even like we didn't even think about that existing. Oh wow.
No.
Was a nope.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So now this article is clear to make sure that all rape is a matter of consent. That anytime one person forces another person into a sexual situation that they do not want to be in, it is rape.
Every time.
Every time. Studies have shown between 10 and 15% of women have been raped by their husbands. Despite these numbers, husbands historically have not been prosecuted for marital rape. So historically, justifications for this was that the contract of marriage entitled the husband to a right to sex, and that by entering into a marriage, a woman has given her consent for the rest of her life.
Yeah, which is, and that plays into something that was talked about in this case with Lorena when she made her outcry to the police. And as an immigrant with English as a second language, she tried to explain the breach of contract.
Yes.
To explain that it's not consensual because I didn't give consent. But also, even if I was forced at the outset to begin a sexual act, he wasn't filling his side of the contract either.
Right.
And so it was so clear to me. I'm like,
right.
You don't have to tell me. I understand. And they didn't even finish that conversation.
No.
They really never got back to the fact that that's what she was trying to say. And I think it was only one or two interviews and statements where they were like, well.
Yeah, it was English as a second language. You don't understand because you're not a woman and you can't understand where she's coming from.
Culturally. Yeah. But so this is a young person who has grown up in a culture where that is true, that the marital contract. Now, she doesn't understand why she's so enraged because she's been raped. She doesn't even know it's rape.
Right.
She really doesn't. She thinks of it as abuse because she's been abused. But the rape portion at that age, that's why the outcry wasn't, I've been raped. It's this awkward explanation that it's not right. It's not right. Like he's forceful and he's physical and he hurts me, but
he doesn't, and he finishes, but I
don't. And so it's her attempt to explain that the contract is breached on all levels, and maybe in a way a man might understand, but
yeah. Because she didn't have the vocabulary to express it.
Or probably even if she had English as a first language at that age and in 1993 and coming from where she's coming from, it was probably really hard to have language that sufficed anyways.
Even still, a lot of states have laws that mitigate rape in some cases. So if a wife's unconscious or incapable of giving consent, that's not rape, and that you have to report it sooner.
Yeah.
And you have to have elevated levels of proof in order to say that it was rape by a spouse. And prosecutors are really reluctant to take on these cases. The prosecutor was sort of reluctant to take on the case against John Wayne and only did so because of pressure.
Yeah. On the other side, I do understand that because spouses can be so volatile and relationships can be so volatile.
Right.
You don't want to give an incentive for somebody to use this against someone.
Right.
In a unlawful or maybe, inflating or going back and saying, well,
yeah.
And so it is a little bit of a, oh gosh, how do you?
Well, they're reluctant to take it on, not necessarily because they don't believe women,
right?
But because it's difficult to prove, because DNA might have been there from a consensual act,
right? And it's hard to prove or show argue a case in which there's some consensual and some not,
right?
And it's hard to show, and that's why the battered women's syndrome and the battered women's laws are so important, because they deal with an overall system of living in that kind of abuse and how that might might play out on the day to day, so that it kind of connects the dots when people are like, but you said yes yesterday.
Yep.
Which is...
And only about half of even forced violent rapes, which not to say that this wasn't forced violent rape and you can't have that in a marital relationship, because you absolutely can. But I mean, like stranger rapes, when you look at the rape kits, there's damage done to the tissue only about half the time.
Yeah.
So it could have been rape, and there's no quote unquote physical evidence of it. So it's a he said, she said situation that can be sticky.
It can be sticky.
So Wendy Shipley really did sell T-shirts with her friend Arlene Danton outside of the Prince William County Courthouse.
I mean, they made T-shirts.
They made T-shirts.
They
she made boxer shorts too.
Yeah, they straight up tailgated this trial.
I mean, I gotta appreciate the entrepreneurship, even if I don't like the idea of like profiting off of someone else's misfortune this way. But, you know, Manassas, Virginia, a cut above the rest is kind of funny.
That is so hysterical. And I laughed at that, and then I felt bad, and then I laughed at it again. Oh. It was quite witty.
So John, even still, continues to deny that he abused his wife in any way.
Yeah.
And witnesses disagree.
Witnesses absolutely disagree.
The Tampa Bay newspaper had an article in 1994 by Carl Vick. A parade of the estranged couple's neighbors, friends, and passing acquaintances testified that John Bobbitt punched, slapped, and humiliated his wife in front of them. They touch on this next bit later in the episode or in the series, but I'm going to say it anyway.
Okay.
He said he likes to make girls squirm and yell and make them bleed and yell for help, said John Whitaker, quoting Bobbitt's statement in an apartment building weight room months before the incident. Whitaker said he and two other men had been enjoying boy talk and sat in stunned silence after Bobbitt chimed in.
Yeah, they were like, what is wrong with this guy?
Ella Jones, an elderly neighbor whose apartment was below the couple, said that on the day before the wounding, Mrs. Bobbitt said her husband had raped her a few days earlier as well. Jones said she gave Mrs. Bobbitt pamphlets on domestic violence and urged her to leave. They were on the bedroom bureau when police arrived the next day. And this is something that was in the documentary, that she had information about being an abused spouse. She knew it. She knew she was an abused spouse, and she felt like she had no other recourse.
And then, okay, this is spoiler for the rest of the series, but they do go on to have quite normal, I quote unquote, normal evidence, not just witnesses. There were phone calls to the police. There were domestic things going on, you know, enough that domestic abuse charges were filed previously, and there were photos.
Let's talk about some of that evidence right now.
Okay.
So John was a former Marine.
I know. Don't come at us. There's no former Marine. Okay.
He's a former Marine. They don't want to take credit for him or blame, whatever. Anyway, it may have had a factor in him no longer continuing with his service.
Oh, interesting. I wondered about that.
Yeah, because all of a sudden he's not working. I'm like, he was a Marine. How is he not working? Like, she should have a break because he's been deployed or something.
Yeah.
So the Washington Post had an article. Marine records on abuse may figure into Bobbitt trial. This is from 1994. A Marine Corps Family Advocacy Review Committee that hears domestic violence cases determined that John Wayne Bobbitt physically abused his wife in late 1990.
Whoa.
A document dated December 21st, 1990 states that the committee had determined that this incident is established physical abuse of Mrs. Bobbitt by Lance Corporal Bobbitt. The Quantico Committee recommended that John Bobbitt attend 12 sessions of a men's support group offered at the Marine Corps Family Service Center beginning in January of 1991, and that the wife attend a dozen sessions of a women's support group. They never did this because he separated from the Marines January 1st, 1991.
Was it honorable? Does it say?
It does not say.
It's interesting.
He left. Now, the attorneys for both of them said that they were not given this information. They weren't notified of the conclusions of the committee. But let me tell you, there is no question that John Bobbitt knew what their conclusions were going to be. And in my mind, my speculation is that's why he left the Marines.
Yeah.
That is why he separated.
So that the whole process never got to a conclusion.
Right.
Ooh, man.
So
Former Marine.
Enough evidence to have him admonished by the Marine Corps.
Yeah. In 1990.
In 1990.
Yep.
They've been married like a year. Janet Basutti was Lorena's boss and friend. She hired not only an attorney for the beleaguered wife, but a media agent, Alan Haig, which was unheard of at the time.
I know, it was really forward thinking of her.
It really was. And ultimately that decision is why Carlos Sanchez and the editors at the Washington Post decided to start using the Bobbitt's name, because prior to that, they had a long-standing precedent of not using the names of sex crime victims in their stories. And they decided, a bunch of men decided that because she hired PR representation, that she wanted the notoriety.
And that bothered me to no end. I understand that it was unheard of, and it was kind of like it was just a before its time sort of move, but the assumption that she wanted attention, I'm like, had John Wayne Bobbitt hired his own media person first, they would have assumed that it was about protecting him from the media, not trying to get attention from it. And that's my speculation, and I get to assume because they assumed. So, you know what? That's how it goes.
Yeah, I agree. That's a lot more common now. And in 2015, there was a public relations agency called Cavalry Public Relations. And almost all public relations agencies now have crisis management.
Okay.
But what they specifically have is victims advocates on board, including mental health advocate Tanya Brown, who's Nicole Brown Simpson's sister.
Oh, wow.
And Micah Mouton, who's the founder of Christopher's Clubhouse and the co-founder of the Surviving Parents Coalition.
That's
so
cool.
they're victim advocates.
It's like a whole new industry now.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of is. And they really wanted to form this with people who really understood what it was like to be inside of, first off, a horrific situation, and then have the media buzzing around you as you're trying to deal with a horrific situation.
Right. It's just so like, wow, that media frenzy. I mean, it's not like they're following you because you're on a red carpet and, you know, you're like in the worst place of your life and, you know, and you're trying, and then their commentary, their, you know, storytelling influences your own outcome. So you have to influence what they say, you know, and it's like, oh, well, I can't even imagine.
I can't either. It's terrible.
And what's awful, let me go off on this tangent.
Yeah, please do.
Okay, what's awful is that if you do it well, you're punished for it.
Yeah. Which is exactly what happened. Yeah.
Because she's beautiful. And one of the media people kind of got her to take the pictures that were all sexy and all of that.
Woman?
Because they know that it sells and she is hot. And so why not use that to her advantage? But she doesn't know why it's really not to her advantage. But, man, it's just, whoo.
Yeah, it was a lot.
She is cute, though. Gosh.
I know.
Wow.
Yeah. So the same prosecutor, Paul Ebert, pursued charges for both John and Lorena. And he did his job.
He did.
But we have evidence now that he may have had opinions.
Yeah.
Okay, so in 2019, there was an article by Taylor Maple in Bustle, how the prosecutor in Lorena Bobbitt's case actually helped her defeat him. So
they touched a little of this.
Paul, they did.
It was a brief.
It was so brief that you could really miss it.
Yeah, kind
in
of.
that, and it was only when he was retiring after 50 years of being a prosecutor.
Yeah,
that he kind of admitted actually that this happened. Like they touched on it, but so briefly, and you didn't really realize that he kind of was the impetus behind this.
Yeah, it's like he got some information through a different channel that is not admissible, but kind of guided him.
Oh, no, it came too late. Let's talk about this.
Okay.
So Joshua Rofi, the director of Lorena, reveals that District Attorney Paul Ebert actively helped the defense's cause by leading a key witness to their doorstep and then refusing to cross-examine her. So the witness, Regina Keegan, called Ebert's courthouse after John's trial.
Right.
And told him that she saw bruises on Lorena's arm when visiting her for a manicure and said it was a terrible manicure and that she didn't even mind because she felt so bad for poor Lorena because she was a mess. Ebert said, that son of a bitch. If I had this, I could have nailed the bastard.
Right. This is what they kind of touched on, was that he got that information a little too late, but not too late for her trial.
Yes. And then he forwarded that information to Lorena's team and then declined to press her testimony in court.
And that's kind of the place, because if he had such information come to him after the fact, then yeah, it's the right thing is to pass it along.
Right.
But he backed off.
Yeah, because he was like, there is no doubt in my mind that this woman was abused.
Yep. I don't think there was ever a doubt in his mind to begin with, but he had to do his job.
Right. Well, and he had to do his job the right way.
Yeah.
He had to do his best to prove that she was guilty.
Yeah.
Or had to do his best to prove that John was guilty. And he ultimately failed on both accounts. One, because he didn't have the information, and two, because he saw the situation for what it really was.
Yeah, he did. And I'm amazed how fair he actually was.
Yes, me too.
And it wasn't his fault that the judge had ruled such crazy parameters around what they could discuss and talk about in the trial against John. But that's a whole other episode. Yeah.
All right, so there's a reason why the former head of forensics at the FBI, who was a witness for the defense in John's trial, isn't named and didn't show his face in this documentary.
All right, talk to me about this.
He said that the panties were definitively cut with a pair of scissors and then ripped, suggesting that Lorena had fabricated evidence.
I just what I heard was blood spatter.
Yeah. Exactly.
If you don't know why I'm saying that, you need to go back into our old episodes and start looking at all of our stuff on Dexter.
Dexter and the staircase.
Oh, yeah, and the staircase. Go listen to those. It's all about the blood spatter. But when I heard him say that, I was like, okay, blood spatter expert.
Yes. So I had to know more about this.
Yes.
So now, granted, this article is from 2018.
So we know more now than we did then.
We know more now. This is from dovepress.com. So we know more, and it can be, the damage to textiles can be really important.
Yes.
It can be extremely helpful evidence.
Okay.
Now, blunt force is a catch-all phrase for any kind of damage not caused by a sharp instrument. So, for example, when the fabric is pulled and then tears, usually at the weakest part of the garment, which is usually a seam.
Yeah.
So it's grabbed and pulled, it rips.
Right.
Yeah. Sharp force damage, which is what he suggests this particular damage started with. It stabs, cuts, where some kind of instrument is penetrating the fabric. Okay. So you can observe some differentiations between these things, but it can be really difficult to determine. Depends on how close the clothing is to the skin. Is it flowy? Does it fit tight? Was it pulled tight for some reason?
Right.
Was it pulled away from the body for some reason? All of these things make a difference. And they talk about it in relation to sexual assault cases.
Okay.
Damage in sexual assault cases is typically blunt force damage where the clothing and underwear have been removed by force, often with the complainant fighting to keep the clothes on. This can result in highly dynamic and complex damage patterns in clothing. One area that has been highlighted as a potential issue in the use of force analysis in sexual assault is the phenomenon of falsification of evidence, which is what he suggested happened, either to back up a false allegation or bolster a perception of weak evidence. And the allegation is common, and the studies show that there's very little actual evidence that points to that being the case.
Okay.
Rarely is it falsified. And there need to be more studies done to understand what's natural wear and tear on the garment.
Right.
So, for example, she may have cut off a tag and snipped a spot. She may have caught it on a ring.
Yeah.
And that makes a similar damage
right.
as a pair of scissors.
And you don't really notice it.
And you don't notice it. Yes. And the quality and consistency of the fabric matters.
Yeah.
And it's so difficult to test every single kind of fabric in every single kind of situation.
Right.
It's just really not possible. And what they talk about also is what normal wear and tear is for one person might be different than for another.
Right.
So if you're a smoker, a cigarette burn is normal wear, maybe normal wear and tear.
Right. Right. Yeah. There you go.
If you're not a smoker and there's a cigarette burn, that becomes far more integral into what happened in that particular situation. So
Makes
basically, they go on to say that anybody who says definitively this is what happened and this is how, they shouldn't be doing this.
I mean, I understand what he was talking about with like, okay, but I also, they didn't really show us exactly how that was and where we didn't get to do a deep dive into where is this cut that he determines is sharp versus where it's from. Because we've all done that before. Well, I don't know, if you cut t-shirts or whatever, like if you ever, cut the neck out of a t-shirt or cut the arms off or whatever, you can kind of snip and then kind of rip if you want to or whatever. Right. But like, I mean, we didn't do a deep dive. And so when he said that, I was like, that seems extreme. And in light of everything else we know, it seems unlikely. And also underwear. Oh my gosh. Underwear tears in the most weird ways like ever.
Absolutely.
It really does.
All the time. And I mean, seriously, and I'm thinking about underwear in the 90s. They all had tags.
Yeah.
I had to cut tags off so many pairs of underwears in 1993.
Yep.
Underwears in 1993.
Yeah. I mean, well, and they're like, depending on the pattern, like there's different seams everywhere, and we don't really even know what kind of underwear it was and what kind of fabric it was. And so it's like, okay.
Yeah.
Well,
were they cotton panties? Were they nylon panties? Were they, was it a G-string? Was it high cut? Was it her granny panties? What was it?
Right. We didn't really talk about that here. So,
you know why? Because that former head of forensics at the FBI is former for a reason. He doesn't want any part of this anymore.
That's right.
So he got his money and peaced out. So John tells us that the drinking that they did on that evening in June of 1983, it was 2 beers or a few beers out with his buddy Robbie. That number is really inconsistent. But then he says they had 2 candy drinks with low alcohol content.
Yeah, and then he describes what's in it, and I'm like...
B-52s.
Okay.
So I looked it up.
All right, yeah. Because he quickly gave us the ingredients, and I was thinking...
He's kind of right.
I mean, I just don't know.
There's a lower alcohol content in that.
As opposed to...
Yes.
I mean, that's kind of the thing here. You can't say lower. You have to say...
It's relatively low.
Fairly low.
Yeah, we'll talk.
Okay. Yeah, hit me. Sorry.
Okay. So B-52s were created by Peter Fitch as he worked in a hotel in Alberta, Canada, and it's named for the band, the B-52s, because that's how he named all of his drinks was after bands that he liked. And it's Kahlua, Bailey's Irish Cream, and Grand Marnier. Okay. It kind of tastes like caramel with hints of orange is what it's described at. So how strong is a B-52? It contains about 26% alcohol by volume, which translates to 52 proof.
So that's pretty low.
That is fairly low. It's more than beer or wine.
Right, but it's...
Beer or wine typically, in the somewhere 8 to 15% range, depending on, how it's made and all different kinds of stuff.
But it's in a very small little...
And it is a small glass. So a shot of hard liquor is roughly twice the amount.
It can be.
It can be
anywhere
80
between...
to 110 or so proof.
Yeah, and some lower.
Some lower.
But most higher.
So it was
relatively
average
low.
or low.
Okay.
On the low side of average,
Thank you, because
maybe.
you run through the ingredients so fast. And I was like, I'm not going to rewind it. But if he said what... And I think he said something else. I think I heard something else in there, but I just didn't rewind it. So
okay.
All right. So he was right. It is still...
I'll give him that.
Okay, I'll give him that. All right.
I'll give him that the candy drinks were low alcohol by volume and take him to task over how many beers exactly did you drink?
Right. And it is still higher than the beers that you drank. So.
So is it
because we know he's not drinking craft beer.
No, right. It's like Bud Light.
Yeah.
Yeah. So is it, is it 2 beers and 2 B52s or is it 8 beers and 2 B52s? Because that makes a big difference.
It does make a big difference. What did he have to eat? Anything?
All the first responders said he was drunk.
Yeah, but, thank you.
So, he says he wasn't drunk, but...
Okay.
Whatever,
I don't know. He slept through getting his penis whacked off, so...
Yep. Lorena told us that she was raped on Friday night by John and then had consensual sex on Sunday and then was raped again when John came home drunk on Tuesday. But based on her statement... I would argue that the sex on Sunday wasn't consensual.
Oh, I would too.
Yeah. Powertodecide.org. Was it rape? Thinking about consent and unwanted sex. Not saying no isn't the same as consenting. If you were too scared or embarrassed to say no, or if you worried that saying no would put you in danger, what you experienced was still sexual assault.
Yeah. We don't get this conversation of consent right. Because, okay, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to call out the schools. Even their curriculum on consent in the schools talks about consent being if somebody says no, you have to back off. And I'm like, if they had to say no, you missed the whole consent thing.
Right.
Because consent is the option to say yes.
Yeah.
And you're saying, just tell me when.
Right.
That's not the same thing. Like, I'm going to push and push and push. And when you finally say no, when you finally draw a line, okay, then I'll back off. Well, yes, that's true too. If you're in a consensual situation, you feel like it's a very consensual situation, and then finally kind of somebody says, oh no, I'm not going there. You're correct. That is a consent situation. But even in the way that we teach people, we're sort of implying that it's always yes until no.
Right.
It's not really that. There's actually a 2-parter here. You're right. If you didn't have a conversation about consent because it was assumed due to relationship or whatever, then no is your consent point. If you've taken away the option to say yes by the situation you're in,
yes,
or by the force in which you engage with the individual, then you've lost consent to begin with, and now they're just screaming stop.
Right. Because she said that she felt like if she said no, that he would do it anyway and it would be painful.
Right. So that's not consent.
That's not consent. That's self-preservation.
Yeah. And had she said no at some point, you're right. That is a part of consent. But we missed the opportunity to say yes.
Yeah. Exactly.
Or the option to say yes safely.
Yes.
Or the option to say no safely.
Yep. All of the sources that we use to inform our discussion here on Killer Fun Podcast can be found on our social media. Join us on Facebook at Killer Fun Podcast, exploring the intersection of crime and entertainment. You can find us on Twitter at Killer Fun Pod, or you can send us an email at killerfunpodcast@gmail.com, and I'd be happy to share a link to whatever information you're looking for. We love to hear from you. You might learn a little something too. psychology break.
Ooh, we're already there, aren't we? We're already talking about it.
Yeah, I asked you to look into a couple things.
I did, and boy, did I.
Yeah. I have one little thing that I want to talk about, but we'll do that one at the end.
Are you sure?
Yeah, that's fine.
You don't want to hit me with it first?
Oh, well, I can hit you with it first. It comes at the very end of the episode.
Okay, hit me.
So, the defense lawyer for John had a huge slip of the tongue at the press conference.
It was so great.
At the press conference following the acquittal, his defense attorney says he, meaning John, is incapable of telling the truth. What he meant was that he was incapable of telling a lie, but he said the opposite.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, so you're saying he's honest, but you're also saying he's extraordinarily unintelligent. John's not an intelligent man. I'm just going to say it.
No.
But he's capable of telling a lie.
Yeah.
He told a bunch in this episode.
Oh, yes. Well, yeah, it's that like very dramatic all or nothing. Like he couldn't even, okay, come on now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Come on.
Like,
thou doth protest too much.
Oh, so yeah. So I looked up Freudian slips. Yeah. So Freud wrote that speech blunders are the result of a disturbing influence of something outside of the intended speech, like an unconscious thought, belief, or wish. And this is from Very Well Mind. Nobody knows exactly why they happen because it's not something we can test.
No.
Unfortunately.
It's a philosophical thing at this point.
Right. There's the idea that when you try to suppress a thought, it tends to be more top of mind. Mm-hmm. So that can increase your likelihood of verbal slips. And, your brain checks in to make sure you're not thinking about the thing you're not supposed to be thinking about, and makes you think about it.
Yeah.
Stupid brain. And that it could be a verbal processing error. Mm-hmm. Just you are thinking of a particular word and you accidentally say the antonym of that word.
Right.
So incapable versus capable.
That would be my thing, is that he obviously thought about his remarks before he got to the mic. And I wonder because saying a negative like that is kind of hard.
Right.
And so your brain goes to the positive. And so it's like, oh man.
He was feeling positive, said the positive verbiage, which was actually negative.
Right. So like he should have just stuck to, he is telling the truth.
Right.
And this showed it. Instead, he wanted to be pithy about it and be like, he is incapable of telling the truth? Oh, whoops. He should have just stuck to,
I laughed my butt off at that.
I did too. Because he says it multiple times. And I think that's what really got me, was he didn't just make the mistake and correct it. He says it and finishes his like grand statement. And I'm like, what is happening?
Did you see John's face behind him? Where he's like, wait, what?
And it was like, what is happening? Is something about to happen? And then he realizes what he says and he corrects it and he laughs it off. But like, oh my gosh, at that moment I was like, oh.
Yeah. So that was the only thing that I could find information that I felt confident was actually what I was trying to talk about. So I sent you messages to this is the thing that I think we should talk about. And I can't find the information because I don't have enough information to make sense about what I want to talk about. So I sent it to you.
What I love is this is like a turn of the tables. I get to hit you with something.
Yes, please do.
I get to show you something.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So is humor attractive? Do you think humor is attractive?
Yes.
Okay, well, other people do too. Darwin is kind of the first one to codify that we think, humor is sort of attractive. He kind of talks about it in the evolutionary thing, like, okay, it must be something that draws us together so that we can have good mates and continue on. But in research, there's kind of different ways you can look at it. You can look at the attractiveness thing, but also humor at incongruous situations, which is what we had with Lorena. Because Lorena is being asked about the incident where she cuts her husband's penis off, and she begins to kind of acknowledge the incident as a part of her statement. And then she kind of looks sort of severe, and then she kind of loses it and laughs her butt off.
Like, okay, and I get this because sometimes you can be appalled at your own behavior and also find the humor in it. And that's what I couldn't quite figure out.
So it's the incongruous situation.
Yes.
It's the fact that I did that.
Yeah.
And also,
like that was terrible behavior, but oh my
gosh, I did that. It's like laughing at the wrong time.
Oh yeah, like when somebody dies or
right.
There's a whole thing in Modern Family about the mom wife, one of the mom wife people is every time she talks about death, she can't help but grin like he died. And she's like got the biggest smile on her face and it's hilarious. And it's the same sort of thing.
Yeah. Something in our minds. It's just like incongruous with either, what we think, what we expect, what we understand. It can be evolutionary, but really a lot has been shown to be cultural.
Okay.
So in the late 1990s and the early aughts, we had some studies where it showed that humor increases our sexual attractiveness.
Okay.
Right. And we did a summary of several studies in this one study where they looked at different aspects of humor. Attractiveness of humor is higher when overall physical appeal is already rated high.
Okay.
So they kind of showed already that it is attractive, but it's not like the thing that makes you attractive. It's like when you already have sort of a
he's
about
cute.
Yeah, then the humor kind of like seals the deal.
Okay.
And so it initiates and maintains social relationships.
Okay.
Right? It's not like a thing that seals the deal, but it seems to be that when two people are in some sort of social contract, whether that be like a romantic relationship or whether it be the media or whether it be an interviewer or just friends or your work, whatever the social contract is, right? Like peopling, okay?
Right.
We maintain it with humor.
Okay.
Humor is like the thing that kind of mitigates and keeps people together. And so that study did their own study and then kind of confirmed it. It's not just sexual relationships, it's across the social relationships. And so what they called it as an interest indicator, though. So it's a good indicator of interest that already exists.
Okay.
Right?
If you find them funny.
If you find them funny, like if you already find them kind of attractive for whatever reason, then the humor is like, okay, you find them funny, you're actually probably already interested.
Okay.
So think about like when you laugh too hard at the person's jokes.
Okay.
Like for some reason, they're just overly funny. And I'm not talking about people who are like talented. Like your husband's talented.
Yes.
Like he's like off the chain funny in ways that other people are not, like, and this is why he makes a living in a creative realm.
Yes, exactly.
Right? So he's just stinking hysterical. Right. And so in that case, it's a little muddy because he's talented at it. But in general, it's like when you have a crush and you're like laughing far too hard at the thing.
Oh, yeah, because I laughed far too hard at his jokes. He was extremely funny when we met,
yeah.
and I still laughed too hard.
And it was like a little awkward, right? Because you're like,
but I couldn't stop laughing.
and girls especially like getting giggly and all weird, and it is both ways.
Yeah.
By the way.
Oh, okay, good.
I mean, women out there, like you also have the opportunity to be funny.
That's right.
With somebody you might be interested in. So the other thing about it though is it's a sign of cooperation.
Okay. Oh, you understand one another.
Yeah, and it kind of helps to kind of click it in.
Okay.
Right? And it can still help increase attractiveness. So if you're like, oh man, that was my thing. Like I'm the funny person. It's all right. Like if somebody wasn't interested in you, it does still like raise your chances. And then once they're a little interested in you, now you've really got it going on. So don't worry. You can still be the funny one.
So for example, I'm thinking of Jim Gaffigan, who's a comedian, and his wife is his writing partner.
Yeah, yeah.
And they must both be funny.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it increases. Like, I'm sure that's like...
Well, and he's like not the most attractive guy. Like, he's attractive enough.
He's the funny one.
But he's funny. And I can see why his wife would be attracted to him, but she must also be funny. Mm-hmm. And that's part of the reason why he's attracted to her.
Right.
I love it. I love it. It's reciprocal.
Yes, it is. And I mean, it doesn't have to be. You don't have to be as funny as your partner, right? And in social relationships in general, like the cooperation, laughing it off. Okay. For instance, the guy who made the attorney, who made his gaffe about not being able to be honest, he laughs it off afterwards. And that was a social cooperation with those who were in front of him to show that he recognized sort of his mistake. And that's what helped them forget about it and not sort of go off on, oh my gosh, this is like a true issue. Like, so he was able to kind of, fix the situation with some laughter.
Yeah.
Right? Because everybody else, it was almost too serious to laugh, I think. Like,
right.
You're like, oh my gosh, what is happening here?
Uh-huh.
But the laughter sort of made a social contract. So it's a sign of cooperation. And then a 2009 study sort of focused on the leader's use of humor to increase followership.
Oh,
and so
okay.
When I looked at that attorney and I looked at Lorena, and I'm thinking they're both actually in that old footage and in this new footage trying to control the situation a little bit.
Okay.
Right? They want to have a good image. We all want that. And they're using humor maybe to make it a little easier to talk about.
Sure.
Right? Maybe make it a little easier to follow their story.
Okay.
That was what come to mind. I was like, is that because it feels like to me she's just laughing because it's incongruous, like it's just so obscene. And it's kind of back to the cliche, like, what else can you do but laugh? Right? I mean, I think in the earlier part of this episode, I laughed hysterically at things that are absolutely horrible because what else can you do but laugh? It's so incongruous.
Right. Super fair.
I was like wondering, okay, is there any other reason why they would do that? And it's the lawyer. I was like, he's controlling the situation with his laughter. I wonder about Lorena. Oh. So I went to look at, leaders' use of humor. And I actually found a study. So I'm talking about a very small breadth of research, just kind of like one or two studies and their sort of citations and references that talks about the group dynamics of humor and how it can increase cohesiveness and tension de-escalation.
Oh, okay.
I know that's a negative, to increase tension de-escalation, but another way is to say that is to increase cohesiveness and decrease tension.
Right.
But the study kind of looks at the way that leaders in somebody in the power dynamic that has the power in the situation is using it. And they point out 3 other studies about humor. And they look at superiority, incongruence, and then relief.
Okay.
So they point out that in general, the research shows that there's these 3 facets of humor. So superiority, incongruence, and relief. You kind of laugh at somebody to kind of like, it's a point of, contempt.
Oh,
right.
Okay.
This is your passive aggressive joke, your backhanded compliment.
Right.
When somebody makes fun of you and you're the butt of the joke and it kind of makes them the funny one in the situation, right? These are superiority techniques. And then you have the incongruence, like in the studies I mentioned earlier, where, we found that people laugh at these like really incongruous places, and that can be cultural. In the previous studies, it's kind of interesting. What they did was they showed like Americans some Japanese films, and there's some Japanese cultural understanding about how certain situations are handled that looks really weird to Americans. And so the Americans are laughing at the situation that the Japanese viewers are like, this is so serious. And so they were able to kind of, I don't know, put a microscope on the incongruency situation, right?
Okay.
And from that, we kind of understand a little bit more about it. Okay. But relief also.
Yeah. She's so relieved to not be in that marriage anymore.
Yeah.
And to have this all behind her.
Yeah, like, oh my God, I cut off his penis. It's done. Like, there's this like overwhelming like relief, and there's a relief that it's all over, and there's a relief that like she's able to move forward.
That she's not in jail.
She's not in jail. She's also a leader.
Yeah.
look at what she does now,
Yeah.
which you don't get in the first episode.
No.
But later on, you realize that she is a leader because she's actually going to others and helping others. And she is working with nonprofits and she is actually a leader. Mm-hmm. She needs this interview to increase followership. And humor is the thing that can de-escalate the tension around the whole incident. It can provide, it's a relief coming out of her that she's not there. It's incongruous when she thinks about who she was then, who she is now. The fact that she would even do that. And it's awkward and weird. Like we can't, wow, you know? So there's all of these reasons for her to be laughing. And nonprofit leaders can use this, but they have to use it in a different way because they don't get to follow up with rewards.
Okay.
Or, compensation and stuff. So they have to make sure they're not doing it like in a superiority way. They have to make sure that it's really about, social cooperation and stuff. But then I thought about something else.
Okay.
I did. And this is the last thing that I kind of thought about on this whole thing. And I think it's the thing that's actually most helpful to us because all this other stuff is research that sort of tells us what we know, which is good. We need that. But how much shame circles around her?
It's got to be so much. She grew up in a very conservative environment, especially when it came to marriage and sexuality.
Mm-hmm. How much of the relief is that she felt was really related to the shame?
Right.
Not just the, oh, wow, that was so hard.
Yeah, it was, she's doesn't have to feel shame over it anymore. But that's why she didn't leave. That's why she cut off his penis rather than just leaving.
Yep.
Because she was ashamed that her marriage had failed, that she'd chosen a partner who was such a poor decision.
Right. And then she starts to likely believe what he says because that's very common. Now it's shame for the whole situation that she didn't just leave. Why can't she do what she's telling everybody else to do now? Why couldn't she do?
But she can empathize with the people who are like, I stayed too long. It's my own fault. And she can be like, no.
So what this is it really speaks to something that Brené Brown is so good at talking about. Her entire life's research, they told her in the beginning that this was a waste of time to look at shame. And look at her. She is our freaking global treasure about bringing this to light. And so shame and laughing it off, that's like a relationship, but for shame resilience.
Okay.
And so it's what the study that I looked at showed was that that laughing it off, that humor sort of facilitates the steps, the factors in producing and maintaining shame resilience. In the shame resilience theory that Brené Brown has authored for us. And so it's like, Brené Brown has some awesome steps and things. I don't know that they're quite linear, but they're the different ways that we can increase shame resilience and address shame and overcome it. And what the study said was that humor seems to facilitate these. And so there's something about her laughing about it now, even though it's so horrible, that shows shame resilience, a healing, and now an ability to go and help others avoid making a choice that they don't, don't want to make because they're in a shameful situation. She's helping others address shame. Right. And that's a really good ending to her story, actually, even though I don't think anybody should have to go through that to have a good ending. But it's beautiful to see how she has adopted that. And so just for your reference, the four main themes of shame resilience theory are understanding the shame events, normalizing them, shifting priorities, and then transforming shame into pride.
Okay.
That's where we end with Lorena, isn't it?
That is, yes.
So I have all those resources, and there's great links we're going to have to post on our socials so that people can link through. And I would say, we talked a lot about some interesting things, and maybe you want to skip it because they're really super nerdy. But I'm going to say you have to go click the link on the Brené Brown stuff and find out more about it because I think it can help anyone who's dealing with shame, whether it's like, a pea-size amount of shame or a lot.
Yeah, mountain-size amount of shame.
Yeah.
Yes. Excellent. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Real life.
Real life.
Oh, God. I read so many stories about penises. So many.
See, it's so funny because I'm like all like, oh, look, we're talking about a beautiful ending and Brene Brown and overcoming shame. And then you're like, I've looked at so many stories about penises. It's so funny.
Okay. So,
I'm not going to say hit me because that feels weird.
So, despite their apparent fragility, they were really more resilient than you might think.
Okay.
So, in 2020, surgeons successfully reattached a man's penis after it was cut off and off of him for almost 24 hours.
Wow. Okay.
Yes. So, he was a mental patient and cut off his own penis. And by the way, this is really rare.
Okay.
To have to reimplant a penis. It's not a thing that happens very often. It's only about 100 or so cases.
Okay.
That have really or ever happened. It's amazing that they can do this microsurgery so well when they have so little experience with it.
Right?
And sometimes it's just the hand of a partner or a assailant of some kind. Sometimes, like in this case, it's their own hand. Sometimes it's an accident.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yes. You typically would want to get it on as quickly as possible. But even with it being off the body for almost 24 hours, he regained complete function.
Wow.
They're really, really resilient because another mental patient in Canada cut off his penis and then swallowed it.
Oh, God. Oh, my God.
And they were able to retrieve it and reattach it to full function. I'm telling you, these penises are very resilient. I know that the men in our lives would disagree with the idea that their junk is really resilient, but
I can't help but think of all of the amazing things that Monty Python could do with this information in the animation age. And I'm ashamed to say that that's what's going through my mind right now.
So, what if they hadn't found John's trimmed tallywhacker?
Oh, the surgeon kind of mentioned this, right? The
Yeah.
surgeon kind of mentioned that he was going to do a tuck of some kind.
Yeah, he was basically going to reroute his urethra so that he could pee sitting down,
right?
easily.
Which is a massive issue. Like that has to be done. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. So he's not like spraying out all over the
Yeah,
room
or stopped up where they need
Right.
a bag.
Right.
Right.
Yeah,
So
we don't
that's
want
a
that
big
either.
deal.
Well, a woman in 2011 did what investigators feared that Lorena might have done, and she put her husband's member down the garbage disposal.
Oh.
So they reconstructed him another penis.
Oh.
So they would take a muscle, typically from a forearm or a thigh, and attach it to the pelvic area, and then make sure it had adequate blood supply, and then covered with a skin graft from another part of the body. And then they have implants that would give it normal function.
Okay.
Yeah, but they said it really wouldn't look right.
Well,
That's the problem. But
neither did John Wayne Bobbitt after he elected to have another surgery.
I really really avoided going and looking at pictures because I've seen enough of his penis.
Yeah.
And it's rare and more recent that the idea that a man might have a transplanted trouser snake. Mm-hmm. So now There's only 4 or 5 of these that have been done in the whole world.
Okay.
And not all of them have been successful. And they're typically reserved for people who've had an injury of some type. So, for example, a soldier wounded in Afghanistan lost his legs and his business, and they were able to successfully transplant a penis and scrotum and some abdominal tissue onto him.
Wow.
To give him basically full function.
Wow.
Yeah. So that, wouldn't have been an option for
No, we wouldn't
John,
have had that
but
technology.
No. Yeah. Kim Gandy of the National Network to End Domestic Violence. And can I say, I really appreciate that to end domestic violence because so many of these places, they mean really well. And they'll say like the Center for Domestic Violence, which actually sounds like they're supporting domestic violence.
It does, doesn't it?
And it drives me crazy. And I'm just I just got to remember that their heart is in the right place. So the to end in there, I really appreciate that. She had some ideas that she presented in the documentary that are replicated in studies. The June 2008 Journal of Emergency Medicine had why women don't report sexual assault to the police. They did a study of why women report or do not report. And about 75% of those people who participated reported the sexual assault to the police, but these were people who were seeking medical attention.
Okay.
And 25% did not file a police report, but consented to take a legal examination, medical legal examination for whatever reason. So the women who were not reporting the sexual assault, employed, may have had a history of recent alcohol or drug abuse, or just use, not even abuse, just they had been drinking. They knew their assailant, and it may have been a prolonged time between when the incident happened and when they had a forensic evaluation. So the reasons for not reporting were primarily environmental factors, like a prior relationship with the assailant, rather than internal psychological barriers like shame, anxiety, and fear. It was external societal factors that they weren't going to be believed anyway, that because they had a relationship with this person that it wasn't really rape, or they brought it on themselves because they were using drugs or alcohol at the time. Oh, such a shame.
It is a shame.
So we always try to end on something kind of fun. So do you have a favorite slang word for penis? No, you don't have a favorite one?
I don't think I have a favorite one.
Well, Thought Catalog has over 150 options.
Wow.
Some of my favorites, in addition to the ones that I have
amazing
mentioned already.
Ones, actually.
The baloney pony. I knew that one was going to get you. A ding-a-ling. A disco stick.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Wow.
The old chap. The pink cigar. And then old favorites like thingy and not sausage, but snossage.
Oh.
That's maybe my favorite one. The snossage.
Oh my gosh.
So next time, I am so excited about this one.
Oh, I've been on pins and needles waiting to see this.
The Patient.
The Patient.
On Hulu. A therapist, Steve Carell.
Oh my gosh, it's going to be amazing.
Becomes a captive of a patient who is not what he seems.
Oh, I just cannot wait. Watch it with us.
Yes.
Yes.
And until next time, be safe, be kind, and wash your hands.
Da da da.